First and foremost, I'm being joined by data analyst Babajide Ogunsanwo, who joins us live here in our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, Jide, for joining us tonight.
Pleasure is always mine.
Appreciate it. Interesting year for those who think, 2023 is not only crucial, but perhaps it will be like a make or mar for Nigeria's future, economically speaking, security-wise, and in a lot of sense. But generally, for you, what do you see about this race?
Sure, there are a lot of ways we can talk about this. We could look at what has happened recently, Peter Obi. We could look at what is likely to happen in the next 48 to 72 hours regarding the PDP's delegates, regarding the APC's delegates. Will there even be anything going on at the Eagle Square? We can get into all of that. Or perhaps let's try and solve that first question. How important is zoning to these candidates? And from my perspective, I think I've got an answer that I would like to share with you, Seun.
Go ahead, please.
The answer lies here. My Nigerian passport.
Is this the old one? Why are you not giving me the new one?
Because I don't trust what you do with this passport. Well, if you take a look at this passport, Seun, I'd like you to open that passport carefully.
Okay.
And go to the data page.
All right. Yeah.
Do you see any information about my state of origin?
Well, this shows where it was issued, but nothing. Okay, your place of birth, yes, is there.
That is exactly what I mean. So we cannot be more Nigerian than our Nigerian passport. In other words, the pinnacle of you being Nigerian cannot be higher than what the passport says about you. The most important information that you need as a Nigerian is in that passport. It gives you a unique identity. It talks about your name. It talks about your age, but it doesn't say anything about your state of origin, nor does it talk about your region. What I mean, Seun, is that zoning cannot be the priority or leading factor to be used to determine who will lead this nation. By no stretch of the imagination am I saying that zoning is not important. Zoning is important for economic planning, administrative, and even for what we are doing now, cerebral gymnastics. But when it comes to how important should zoning be when delegates or when people want to choose who leads this country, zoning cannot be the number one criteria.
But will age matter?
Yes, age could matter, but hey, let's really trash the zoning thing before we go into age and the impact it will have on who leads this country. Zoning. There's a zone that is the most important zone in Nigeria.
And which is?
Do you think it's the Northeast, the North Central, or the Northwest?
Maybe the Northwest. In terms of, if you look at the political mathematics.
Sure, I'll take a risk and I'll tell you the most important zone in Nigeria today. That zone is the youth zone. Now, what do I mean by the youth zone is the most important zone in Nigeria? Let's take a look, Seun, at the current register of INEC. What does the number of registered voter database look like? And if you totally study INEC's database, here's what you find. INEC tells us that Nigerians between the ages of 18 to 35 are the majority on the number of people who have registered. Why is this important, Seun? According to the National Youth Policy, you are defined as a youth if you are between the age of 18 to 35. 18 to 35 is that age bracket that Nigeria defines as a youth. And it is that age bracket that dominates those who have registered to vote in Nigeria. In other words, 1 out of 2 names on INEC's database is a youth. And that's why I tell you that the youth zone is the most important. And that is good news, Seun. Now let's talk about the bad news. And I would like you to take a look at something else, which is what worries us. So the first is, remember what I've said, the youth zone is the most important because the youths dominate that database. Here's the concern and here's the bad news. Since 2003, voter turnout has been consistently declining.
It's been dropping.
Now, in other words, the youths are not turning out to vote. But here's a better way to put it. The Nigerian youths are getting less interested in democracy. And if we've been following that trend since 2003, we'll have been able to understand better the problems that lay ahead. But we're not just saying voter turnout is declining. The right phrase to use is that the Nigerian youths are getting less interested in democracy. That is
what could be the cause?
One of the causes, three things. First is we're seeing less people registering. Among those that are registering, we're seeing less people coming out to vote. And among those that even vote, we are seeing less people coming back again to vote. So listen to this. When we started this analysis, we've been doing this, you and I, for more than 10 years, over a decade. We were both youths then. So today, based on the policy, we are no longer a youth.
You're an old man.
we're old men. So 10 years ago, we represented the future of Nigeria. We are gradually going to become the past of Nigeria. What the future of Nigeria wants is not only them voting, they want to be able to see younger candidates on the ballot.
And do we have these young candidates on the ballot?
So we've seen some candidates from the major political parties. We've seen PDP, APC. We've also seen some candidates from the new 16 other political parties. But what we have is there's more information in the public space about what's going on in the APC and in the PDP. So I've carefully looked at who are the relatively young adults that these two parties have thrown up. And I'd like us to take a look at some of the names that we can classify not as youths, but as young adults that the youth perhaps could consider.
Okay, so we have the names of the youngest or the faces of some of the youngest in the race.
So we have Mrs. Tara Oba, who is perhaps one, if not the youngest presidential candidate.
She's of the PDP.
Yes, yeah. We have Dr. Nicholas, we have the governor of Kogi State, Yaya Bello, who is 46 and is perhaps the only current candidate sitting governor in that list. We have Dimeji Bankole and we have Tenjak Rich. So we've seen that we are seeing some young adults, not youths, coming into that space. Again, because the definition of a youth based on the Nigerian policy is 18 to 35. And we've seen that we need to get more people into this mix. We also need to get even the youths to believe in some of their programs, to pick up and check some of their manifestos and be able to determine.
Does the ages of the presidential aspirants or candidate, does it really matter in the race? Does it really add quality to the personality? Does it take anything away or add anything to their quality in the race?
It does. So what we could do is I wanted us to take a look at some of the constitutions of these young candidates, but we can take a look at what has happened in the US to find out if the age of some of their presidents impacted on the economic growth, on the performance of the economy. And then we'll look at what has happened in Nigeria in the last 3 decades, to look at the presidents that we've had, to look at their age, and to see if there's any correlation between the age of the Nigerian president and economic growth. So we could start by taking a case study of what happened in the US. And if you look carefully at what you have in front of you, you can see that when Bill Clinton came in 1992, it was 46 years old, and within those 4 years, the US economy grew by 14%. When he did his next 4 years, it was 50, and the economy even grew faster. Take a look at Barack Obama, who was 51 when it made the economy grow within 4 years of 9%. In summary, what we've seen with the US case study is we see some correlation that a younger president provided rapid economic growth in the United States. That's the evidence. It's not a 100% correlation, but we see that younger presidents in the US within the last 3 decades.
There's a relevance of it.
There's some relevance.
That the younger you become, the figures shows that there's a possibility of a difference in performance economic-wise.
That is correct, but age is not just the only factor. We see some correlation, not a causation. So we're not saying that the economic growth was because of the age. Yes, but we see that there's some correlation that these younger presidents...
There's an inference.
There's an inference that we can draw that, yes, they were able to averagely do better than the relatively older ones.
Okay.
But let's look at the case of Nigeria to look at what has happened since 1999 to date to find out if age and economic growth correlated. And if we look at what has gone on, in 1999, President Obasanjo was 62, economic growth was 41%. His next 4 years, we see there was still rapid economic growth, but it declined not as much as his first 4 years. And then comes in Yar'Adua, 56, double-digit economic growth, and Goodluck Jonathan as well, double-digit economic growth. What we've seen, and the analysis of this shows that unlike the United States, in Nigeria, age has some relevance, but not as significant as the United States. Indeed, what this even really shows us, what is in front of you, what it tells us is in every 4 years since we started,
1999.
since 99, economic growth has reduced. So our first 4 years, 41%. Next 4 years, 35. Next 4 years, 27, 29, and 3%. So the challenge we have in Nigeria is not necessarily the age of the president, but it is more of, can the president, despite his age, grow the economy? And that is where the party manifestos comes in. The candidates' manifestos, which the delegates need to read, and eventually when we get into the election, everybody, all the youths need to be able to look at those manifestos to determine what's going on. And here's what I've quickly done.
But I mean, so for those who will criticize and say, look, the manifestos of almost all the aspirants or the candidates at elections are always the same. It does look, in fact, some people will accuse the other that you copied my manifesto. That was a copy. That was a photocopy of what I had as my agenda. Does a manifesto really matter in this age and time? Because it's more or less the same. I'll provide jobs. I'll provide security. But getting to the nitty-gritty of how to get it done, does it not matter?
Yes, it does. And I've been studying presidential candidates' manifestos since 2011. Here's what I've noticed. In 2011 and 2015, the manifestos were similar. 2015 to 2019, the manifestos were similar. But now, in 2022, in preparation for the 2023 elections, we are seeing a bit of difference in the manifestos. And if we try and study their manifestos under 5 headers, looking at equity, accountability, wealth creation and management, education, security, power generation and industrialization, what I've found out is some candidates do better than others. So, for instance, equity, accountability, the manifestos of these candidates currently that we're studying are approximately the same regarding equity and accountability. But when it comes to their plans for wealth creation and resource management, we see some candidates' manifestos being driven more by facts and figures, which is what we are really interested in. So for wealth creation and management, we've seen Peter Obi's manifesto coming high. We've seen the manifesto of Governor Yaya Bello coming high. In education, we've seen the manifesto of Aminu Tambuwal being driven by a lot of facts and figures. We're seeing the manifesto of Professor Yemi Osinbajo. We're also seeing Ogbonaya Onu coming very detailed with their plans on education. On security, we're seeing 3 candidates whose manifestos stand clearly higher than majority of the others. We're seeing Kayode Fayemi, we're seeing Aminu Tambuwal, and we're seeing Yaya Bello. When it comes to power generation and industrialization, it changes a bit. We are seeing Bola Ahmed Tinubu's manifesto being a bit more data-driven and specific when it comes to his plans for power, and Yemi Osinbajo also coming a bit more detailed than the others when it comes to power. In all, we've summarized this for potential delegates and potential voters in this way. If you're looking at the young adults, then some of the interesting manifestos that you should read include that of Professor Osinbajo. Peter Obi comes there, Aminu Tambuwal, and Yaya Bello. For middle-aged candidates, we see Professor Yemi Osinbajo's manifesto coming out as one of the interesting manifestos. And for the older brigade, you probably want to pick a copy of Bola Tinubu's manifesto. In all, Seun, the outlook for what will happen within the next 48 to 72 hours will be interesting. What will the delegates do? Will they just take their votes based on age, or will it be based on these manifestos that we have summarized here?
Interesting indeed. Manifestos are very important because you do not have a place in the race if you don't have a plan, and your plan is captured in the manifesto. But the crucial thing is how we are able to challenge and to question the nitty-gritty of what is contained in the manifesto. And do we have a history of people following through with their manifestos in this country?
So what we've seen is a lot of times we don't have a promise tracker, which is what civil society needs to do better, which is when the candidates are elected into office, we need to look at those promises. that each of these candidates have made and track those promises. But here's why I say there's a difference between what happened in 2018 and 2022. In 2018, a lot of the candidates that wanted to be voted for, they don't have very specific manifestos. Some of them had only 2-page manifestos. They were waiting for them to be elected before developing full blueprints. This time around is different. We have some candidates who already have very detailed manifestos, even though they haven't been elected as the candidates of their parties. And this is what makes it interesting. Our hope is shown that the delegates that will vote will pick up these manifestos. We'll look at some of these things that we've reviewed. We'll look at some of these young candidates and look at the middle-aged candidates and look at the old brigades. Study these manifestos and follow those manifestos that are driven by facts and figures. Look at those manifestos that don't just only talk about what they will do. Pick candidates that talk about how they will do what they will do.
Because the delegates also, I hope the delegates will be looking at this, because they will be the one that will be making the decision this weekend for most of the political parties running to Monday and Tuesday until Wednesday, when there's going to be a closure to primaries.
These are very interesting times, exciting times. In 2018, I know PDP then had about 4,000 delegates. It's likely PDP will just have perhaps only 811 delegates this time around. Same thing, the APC, if there will be, if they choose to go into Eagle Square, they probably will have about 2,000 delegates,
3,000,
almost 3,000. But here's something I need to tell you, Sean. What is happening at the Oval Square is currently more important than what will happen at the Eagle Square. Now, what do I mean by what is happening at the Oval Square?
Venue of the PDP.
Venue of the PDP. Venue of the APC's convention.
Is the Eagle Square.
Is the Eagle Square. But what is happening at the Oval Square? The Oval Square is more important than the Eagle Square. Now, what is the Oval Square? The Oval Square is in the brain of Mr. President.
All right.
In other words, there's likely going to be a pre-primaries before the primaries. And that pre-primaries is going on currently in the mind of President Buhari.
All right. It's part of the charge that we've thrown out and thrown up to delegates right here on China's television as a duty that we've taken up, is that all the delegates need to take Nigeria first and put money second. Secondary, put money aside and focus on the person that will be able to do the job and do Nigerians proud. Thank you so much, Julie, for coming.
We should look at the outlook of the primaries.
Absolutely.
What will happen between the two major parties? And if there's sufficient time, let's look at what will happen across the other secondary
we
parties.
Should be able
that
to
will
do
be
that tomorrow, isn't it? You'll be able to be here tomorrow?
Pleasure will all be
all right,
mine.
Great. It's good to see you again. Yeah, just stay with me, Julie.